I knew dinner was going to suck the moment my father pulled out the "you're a disappointment" card before the salad even hit the table. "You know, Eric," he said, slicing into his roast chicken like he was carving a victory trophy, "your sister's about to publish her 3rd medical paper. Meanwhile, you're still chasing fire trucks." There it was, a fresh serving of shame with a side of mashed potatoes. "Then go ask your star daughter for help next time your house catches fire," I muttered. His fork paused midair. Mom looked horrified. And Claire, Dr. Claire Harper. 31, the family prodigy, just smirked, sipping her wine like it was applause. "Hi, I'm Eric. I'm 29 and a firefighter," which in my family makes me the village idiot with a pension. Claire's the definition of perfect, at least according to our parents. She's a doctor at a fancy clinic, wears expensive heels to family events, and drops Latin terms like she's casting spells. I pull people out of burning cars. She prescribes flu meds. But guess who gets framed in the living room like she won the Nobel Prize? Yeah, not the guy with soot on his boots. Every Sunday, the same circus repeats. We walk in. And within 30 seconds, Mom is already introducing Claire as our daughter, the doctor with that sparkle in her eyes like she's personally responsible for creating modern medicine. When it's my turn, I get, "And this is Eric. He works for the city." They say it like I clean sewers or chase stray dogs. Funny thing is, I used to admire Claire. She was smart-focused and knew what she wanted. When she got into med school, I bragged about her. I even framed her acceptance letter and hung it in my apartment. That's how proud I was. But over the years, pride curdled into something bitter, something sour. You ever have a sibling who never loses? Like never. Claire could burn toast, and our parents would call it avant-garde. Meanwhile, I could rescue a kid from a house explosion, and they'd ask if I was still doing that firefighter thing. Still doing it? I've been doing it for 6 years. Passed my EMT certification, got trained in hazmat high-angle rescue. The whole 9 yards, I manage real emergencies, chaos, fire injuries. I've held people as they took their last breath and pulled others back from the edge. But Claire, she gives people antibiotics and gets called a hero. I let it go for years. Bit my tongue during every condescending remark, every snide. "When are you going back to school?" Claire threw my way. I figured maybe if I just kept doing my thing, being good at my job, being dependable, they'd eventually see me. Spoiler, they didn't. Then last Christmas happened. We were all gathered at the table, and my uncle, bless him, asked how work was going. Before I could answer, Dad jumped in, with "Claire was just promoted to lead physician." "Cool," I said. "I completed my wildfire incident response training last month." "That's nice," dear Mom replied, like I just shared my high score on a video game. Claire leaned in and asked, "Do they actually test you on anything, or do they just let anyone hold a hose?" The table went silent. Dad laughed. I stared at my plate, tasted the metallic tang of resentment mixing with cranberry sauce. That night, I stood outside in the snow, watching my breath fog the air. Claire walked past me to her car heels clicking like gunshots on the driveway. "You really think you're saving the world, don't you?" she said without turning. "No," I replied, "but at least as I'm not pretending." She didn't respond, just drove off taillights, bleeding into the dark. It would have ended there like it always did. Me fuming them, ignoring it, Claire floating above it all. But things started changing in small, strange ways. Claire became quiet at dinners. Not her usual smug, "I'm better than you" silence. More like haunted. Her phone rang a lot and she never answered. She stopped bringing her boyfriend around. Her stories about patients and promotions disappeared. It was eerie. Then, one Sunday in spring, she showed up late hair, messy eyes, shadowed, wearing flats instead of stilettos. She didn't touch her food, barely spoke. When Mom asked how work was going, Claire mumbled, "It's fine," and left halfway through the meal. That wasn't just weird, that was alarming. I thought maybe she was burned out. Doctors work long hours, right? Maybe she lost a patient. Maybe she was just tired of always being perfect. But the truth was uglier, way uglier. A month later, she called me. Me. Not Mom, not Dad, not one of her fancy friends, me. "Eric," she said, voice brittle. "I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to hang up." "Okay," I replied, sinking onto the couch. And then she said it. "I lost my license." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Like your driver's license." So she laughed, but it wasn't funny. "No, my medical license. God, I couldn't process it. Claire without medicine was like a bird without wings. What happened?" And then she broke, told me everything. Turns out she'd misdiagnosed a patient. Not once, not twice. But enough times for the board to start sniffing around. She'd been rushing appointments, making guesses, skipping exams. The last straw was a misdiagnosis that nearly killed someone. Permanent damage, ICU. The patient's family sued. Hard. The investigation uncovered more patterns, negligence, arrogance. Her license wasn't suspended, it was revoked permanently. She was out, done. Claire Harper, the doctor, was officially not. I've been hiding it for months, she said through sobs. I thought I could fix it. Appeal, transfer, something. But I can't. It's over. I didn't know what to say. But I knew what was coming next. And sure enough, she said, I need help, Eric, financially. Of course. Of course it was me. The disappointment. The failure. The guy with the not a real career. Suddenly, I was the one with the safety net. Steady job, savings, benefits, a pension. The golden child had crashed. And now they were crawling back to the one they buried under praise for someone else. I didn't answer right away. But I knew this was just the beginning. I didn't sleep much that night. Claire's voice kept looping in my head, the way she said, it's over, like it still hadn't sunk in. The truth is, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I just felt exhausted. For years, she'd been the benchmark I could never reach, the one our parents used to measure my every step, and now she was calling me because the life they all praised her for had burned down to ash. I told her I'd think about it, that's all I said. And I meant it. Not because I was planning to say yes, but because I wasn't ready to say no. Not yet. I needed time to wrap my head around the fact that the woman who once asked if I ever planned to get a real job now needed me to pay her rent. 3 days later, my doorbell rang. I figured it was a package or maybe the neighbor's kid selling fundraiser popcorn. I was not prepared to see all three of them on my porch. Claire, Mom and Dad standing like they'd rehearsed it in the car. Claire looked pale and thin, like the stress had been eating her alive. Mom was wringing her hands like a nervous hostage. And Dad? Dad wore that look he saved for times he didn't want to be there, but had something he needed. It reminded me of when he asked the neighbor to help fix our broken lawnmower, even though he swore he could do it himself. Eric, Mom said, forcing a smile. We were hoping we could talk to you, as a family. That line made something twist in my gut. As a family. That phrase never included me unless they needed something. I let them in out of the cold and out of obligation, not affection. They sat on my couch like guests in a stranger's house, perched cautious, rehearsed. Claire wouldn't look at me. Mom opened with small talk, like pretending this wasn't a financial ambush would make it less pathetic. I let them fumble through the niceties until Dad finally cleared his throat. Your sister told us what's going on, he said. And we want to help, but we just can't. Not financially. I nodded, I figured. That's why we're here, Mom added. To talk to you about options. Options. The way she said it, like she was suggesting payment plans on a car I didn't buy. I didn't say anything, just waited. She needs help, Eric, Dad said. And you've always been responsible. You've got a stable job, a savings account, you live modestly. That part stung. Live modestly. Translation. You don't spend money because you don't have a life. Claire finally looked up then. Her eyes were red, but her face was dry. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I've been awful, but I'm asking because I have no one else to turn to. I could have exploded. Thrown every insult, every dinner table slight, every moment they humiliated me just to build her higher. But I didn't. Instead, I asked, why didn't you tell me soon? And Claire hesitated. Because I didn't want you to see me like this. And that was the most honest thing she'd said in years. She didn't want me to see her broken because in her world, I wasn't supposed to be above her in anything, not even pity. Dad leaned forward. Son, this is serious. She's looking at lawsuits, medical debts, possibly losing her apartment. I turned to him. So you think I should just write a check? No one said that Mom cut in. But if you could help, even just get her through the worst of it. You mean carry her, I said, until she figures out what to do with the rest of her life. Their silence was answer enough. Claire stared at her lap like the carpet was fascinating. I stood paced once across the room. My heart wasn't racing, just steady tired. Let me ask you something. When I pulled that kid out of a burning building last summer, did any of you know? Mom looked confused. What building? Exactly, I said. Because you never asked, never cared. But Claire prescribes allergy meds and you throw her a damn parade. Eric, Dad started, but I cut him off. You want me to bail her out, fine. But let's not pretend this is about love or loyalty. This is about convenience. I'm the last resort, the forgotten son with a safety net. That's not true, Mom said, voice cracking. Isn't it? I snapped. You made me the outsider. Now you want me to save the insider because suddenly her life is falling apart. Where was this unity when you were comparing my job to a hobbit? Claire finally spoke, voice hoarse. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm not asking because I think I deserve it. I'm asking because I'm drowning. That hit differently, not because it was manipulative, because it was real. For once, no pride, no superiority, just someone who had nowhere else to turn. I'll think about it, I said again, but this time it came out heavier. They stayed another half hour trying to spin the situation into some emotional rallying cry. I didn't engage, just watched them talk like a family that was still pretending they were fine. After they left, I sat in silence for an hour. Thought about the years I spent trying to be enough. Thought about the calls that never came, the birthdays that got overshadowed the conversations I was excluded from. I thought about Claire asking me for help because now I was the one with the real job, the steady life, the savings. They used to call me reckless for choosing a dangerous career. Now they were hoping my stability would bail them out of a mess built on their own pride. And for the first time, I realized something: I didn't need their approval anymore. They needed me, not the other way around. The next week felt like I was walking through someone else's dream, quiet, surreal, but always on the edge of something. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, texts from mom like, just checking in, and Claire's messages piling up under a thread labeled, please. I didn't respond to most of them, not out of cruelty. I just needed space to breathe, to think, to figure out if helping them would be a sacrifice or a mistake. I started noticing little shifts in the air around me. At work, I was focused more than usual. Every call, every emergency, I handled it with this sharp clarity. Like my mind needed to prove that I was grounded, capable, unshakable. It was almost therapeutic. One night, while restocking the medic bay, my captain leaned over and said, "You good, man? You've been laser-focused this week?" I just nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." He gave me a look that said he understood without needing details. That's the thing about my crew: we face chaos daily, but we know when one of our own is carrying something heavier than a hose. By Thursday, I decided I needed answers. Not from Claire, she told her story. I needed to know the truth behind the perfect facade my parents had polished for decades. So I drove to their place unannounced, parked across the street, and just sat there for a minute. Their house looked smaller somehow, like the weight of reality had shrunk it. Dad answered the door in sweatpants, which was a first. He looked surprised, then guilty, which told me everything before we even spoke. "Didn't expect you," he said. "Yeah, I figured." He stepped aside and let me in. The living room was dim, blinds half closed, like the house was ashamed of itself. Mom was on the couch with a stack of unpaid bills spread across the coffee table. Her expression was tight, defensive. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I just need to know the truth." She sighed and motioned for me to sit. "It's not that we were lying, Eric. We just didn't want you to worry." "About what?" "That the golden child fell off her pedestal, or that you spent years pretending everything was fine while everything crumbled behind closed doors." Silence. Then Dad finally said it. "We overextended. Between Claire's med school, helping with her apartment, her car payments, we burned through savings faster than we expected." "You mean you funneled everything into her future and didn't think twice about what that meant for yours or mine?" I said. Mom flinched. "We wanted her to succeed. We thought we were investing in her stability." "At the expense of your own," I replied. "And you couldn't even admit it until you had no choice." They looked like two people drowning in a lie they told so often it felt like truth. I left without yelling, without judgment. But now I knew. Everything they built around Claire was a house of cards, and the wind had finally caught up. That night, Claire called again. This time I picked up. "I'm not asking you to fix everything," she said softly. "Just help me get back on my feet. I'll find something else. I'll figure it out." Doing what Claire I asked. "You're not licensed to practice anymore. You can't just pivot to consulting. You've never done anything else." The pause on the line was deafening. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to work at a grocery store if I have to." "Would you have said that a year ago?" "No," she answered honestly. "Because I thought I was untouchable. And just like that, I saw her clearly, not as the pedestal sister, not as the smug golden child, but as a person finally reckoning with her own failures. Still didn't mean I had to be her safety net. The next day, I got a visit from someone I didn't expect. My Aunt Rena showed up at the station during my lunch break. She's Mom's younger sister, the black sheep of the family, until I accidentally inherited that title. She handed me a brown paper bag, homemade sandwiches, and chips. "Figured you didn't have time to eat real food anymore," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "You know what's going on." "Of course I do. Your mom has been calling everyone with a pulse, hoping someone will convince you to pay up." I smirked, then shook my head. "Figures. You're not wrong to hesitate, Eric," she said seriously. "But just remember, helping doesn't mean forgetting." That stuck with me. Helping doesn't mean forgetting. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and pulled up my financial spreadsheets. I'd been saving for a down payment on a house. I had enough set aside for a decent chunk of it. Helping Claire would wipe out a good third of it. It wouldn't ruin me. but it would delay the life I'd worked so hard to build. Was it worth it? Was this a step toward forgiveness, or a replay of the same story me giving while they took? I kept staring at the numbers, hoping they'd speak to me. Then I thought about something Claire said about being untouchable, and I realized maybe this wasn't about punishment. Maybe it was about letting her sit in the silence long enough to actually listen to herself. Because for the first time in years, she'd stopped talking and started hearing what her life had become. And as much as I hated what they did to me, I couldn't hate the version of her who finally understood what it meant to fall. So I picked up my phone not to send money, but to send a text. You need to show me a plan. I'm not throwing money at a problem you haven't mapped out. If you're serious about fixing this, prove it. She responded an hour later, deal. Give me 3 days. For the first time, I believed she meant it. 3 days later, she called like she said she would. No buildup, no dramatics, just I made a plan. Can I come by? I told her to come after my shift. I wanted to see her face, read her honesty in real time. That evening, she showed up at my apartment holding a manila folder and 2 takeout bags. Didn't know if you'd eaten, she said. She hadn't brought food for me in years. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing either. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one I'd stared at while debating whether or not to give her a lifeline. She opened the folder, pushed a printout toward me. It's a budget, she explained. 3 months of projected expenses, part-time work possibilities, and debt prioritization. It's not perfect, but it's real. I scanned through it. She'd mapped it out like a med school presentation. Color-coded, itemized, labeled. Rent utilities, minimum legal fees, job applications to places that didn't care about doctor titles. She'd even included a section called Emotional Accountability. What's this? I asked. She looked up, eyes steady. It's what I owe you that's not money. Respect, honesty, understanding. I've never given you that. And I should have. I didn't say anything for a long time. Just stared at the page, then back at her. She looked tired but clear. Still beaten down but trying. This doesn't fix everything, I finally said. It's not supposed to, she replied. It's just a start. I nodded. You'll need to check in. I want receipts. I want to see progress. I'm not bailing you out. I'm investing in your effort. Her eyes welled a little, but she didn't cry. Fair. I transferred the first portion 2 days later, just enough to cover rent and food for the month. Enough for her to breathe but not coast. She messaged me that night I got a job offer front desk at a local community clinic. Not glamorous, but it's something. For the first time, her words didn't carry the weight of superiority. Just humility and hope. Things started shifting after that. Subtle like the way seasons change without announcing it. Claire didn't just ask for more money, she asked for advice. How to budget, how to apply for non-clinical roles, how to talk about transferable skills in interviews. She was learning, not just survival, but life without the crutch of prestige. And that more than anything convinced me I'd made the right call. But if Claire was starting to change, our parents were doing the opposite. Mom called me one evening, voice tight, with something that wasn't quite anger but wasn't gratitude either. Your sister said you helped her, she said. That's good of you. She's earning it, I replied. I'm not just handing her anything. Still, she said, and there was a pause. You always were dependable. It should have felt like validation. Instead, it sounded like she was reading from a script she barely believed. We're thinking of selling the house, she added. Downsizing. You mean you have to? I said flatly. Let's not pretend this is a choice. She went quiet. Things haven't been easy. I didn't say what I was thinking, that they had made things hard for themselves by building a life around appearances and ignoring reality. That they threw all their eggs into one basket and never imagined it would fall. She asked if I wanted to come over for dinner that weekend. Family dinner, she said. I almost declined. But part of me wanted to see if anything had actually changed or if they were just reassembling the same broken picture and pretending it was whole. I showed up Saturday night to find the usual chaos, overcooked chicken, mismatched napkins, and an awkward energy that clung to the air like humidity. Claire was already there helping Mom in the kitchen. Dad was watching the news, pretending the world wasn't falling apart around him. But something was different. Claire didn't take the best seat at the table, didn't talk over anyone, didn't flash her usual stories about patients and procedures. She asked me how work was going and listened. Genuinely listened. Mom still tried to steer the conversation toward Claire's rebuilding phase, but Claire cut her off gently. It's not about me tonight, she said. Eric's been through enough to deserve some spotlight. It was the first time in my life my name and spotlight had ever been used in the same sentence by her. Dad didn't say much, but he watched me carefully, like he was trying to see something new or maybe just trying to accept what he'd ignored for so long. After dinner, Claire helped Mom with dishes, and I sat in the living room with Dad. We didn't speak for a long time, just watched the muted news. Then he cleared his throat. "Your sister's lucky," he said, "that you were willing to help." "She's lucky I didn't walk away like she would have," I said without looking at him. He nodded slowly. "You're not wrong." The words sat between us like something too heavy to move. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Progress, maybe. Or acknowledgement. I didn't need them to suddenly see me as the golden child. I didn't need them to praise me like they did her. I just needed them to stop pretending I was invisible. And in that moment, sitting in the same room I grew up being compared in, I felt a shift. Not in them. In me. I wasn't bitter, I wasn't angry, I was just done seeking approval that never mattered. That night, Claire walked me to my car. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for the money, for everything." "You're welcome," I said. "Just don't make me regret it." I won't. And for the first time, I actually believed her. Back home, I sat in my living room, the quiet humming like peace. It wasn't over, not really. The debts were still real, the wounds didn't magically vanish, but something had healed anyway, just enough to breathe easier. The weeks that followed were quiet, not in the absence of noise way, but in the sense that the chaos finally took a breath. Claire started her job at the clinic, just part-time answering phones and scheduling checkups, but she treated it like a lifeline. And maybe it was. Every few days she'd text me updates, made it through a shift without crying, or they offered me extra hours next week. Each message felt like a tiny flag planted in unfamiliar soil. She was building a new life brick by honest brick. And I kept my word. I checked in, asked for receipts, made sure she didn't fall back into old habits of letting pride do the talking. She didn't. Not once. But something else was happening in the background, slower and harder to see. My parents, who had once clung to their pride like armor, were unraveling in a different way. It started with small things. The house that was always spotless now had unopened mail stacking up on the hallway table. The garden, once trimmed like a magazine spread, grew wild in spots. Mom stopped talking about her book club. Dad stopped pretending football Sundays were sacred. It was like they didn't know who they were without the illusion of control. One night, Claire and I met for coffee after her shift. She was still in scrubs, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked normal. Human. "They're falling apart," she said, no sugar in her tone. They won't say it out loud, but it's like they don't know how to function without pretending we're perfect. I nodded. I'd seen it too. That slow collapse of people who'd spent years performing a role they didn't even realize was a performance. "I keep wondering if this would have happened sooner if they'd ever listened to you," she added, stirring her drink without looking up. "Maybe if they hadn't turned everything into a contest, we'd all be in a different place now." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Some truths sit heavier when left unsaid. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "This is the money I've saved so far. I know it's not much, but I want to start paying you back." I stared at it, then at her. She wasn't doing it for show. There was no guilt in her eyes, just accountability. The kind you don't teach. The kind you learn the hard way. I pushed it back toward her. "Save it. You'll need it before I do." She didn't argue, just nodded. That weekend, Mom called again. This time it wasn't about money. It was about Dad. "He's been forgetting things," she said. Small things. Dates. Appointments. I caught him trying to put milk in the pantry. I felt the edge in her voice, the fear hiding under the worry. "Has he seen a doctor? He won't go. Says he's just tired." But I know it's more than that. I offered to stop by and maybe talk to him. She agreed too quickly. When I arrived, Dad was out back, sitting in the same chair he'd used to lecture me about responsibility and real careers. His eyes looked glassy, like the present was too slippery to hold on to. "Hey," I said, easing into the seat across from him. "You all right?" "Tired," he said. But fine, I didn't press. Instead, I asked him about old fishing trips, about the junk car he tried to restore in our garage when I was 10. And for a few minutes, he came back. Talked about broken spark plugs and the one weekend it actually started. Then his voice trailed off. "Can't remember what we did with that car," he said. "Sold it? Scrapped it," I reminded him. "You said it was more rust than metal." He nodded slowly, but the recognition didn't stick. I told Mom we needed to get him tested. She promised to call the doctor, then asked me if I'd come to the appointment. "He listens to you more now," she said. The irony nearly made me laugh. For decades, I was the ignored voice in the room, and now I was the anchor. I said yes. Not because I owed them, but because this wasn't about repayment anymore. It was about closing the loop, doing the right thing, even when the past hadn't. Claire came with me to the appointment. Dad was grumpy resistant and tried to joke his way through the memory test, but even he couldn't laugh off the results. Early onset cognitive decline. Possibly Alzheimer's. The doctor said it gently, carefully. Still, it landed like a hammer. Claire cried in the hallway. Mom sat frozen in the exam chair. And Dad? He looked tired. Not scared. Just worn thin. Back at their house, we sat at the dinner table. The same one where I used to shrink while they bragged about Claire and barely asked about me. Now we were all quiet, staring at the space between us. Claire broke the silence. We need to talk about care, about next steps. Mom shook her head. We can manage. No, I said. You can't, and pretending you can won't make this easier. Mom looked at me like she was seeing someone else. Maybe she was. Maybe I'd stopped being the afterthought and become something they didn't quite understand yet steady. Claire spoke again. We'll help, but this has to be honest. No more pretending things are fine when they're not. Mom didn't reply, just nodded, slow and stiff. Later, while I helped Dad to the couch, he grabbed my arm and said, "You've become someone I wish I'd seen sooner." That sentence stayed with me, not because it was poetic, because it was the first thing he'd ever said that acknowledged the years we lost. I didn't cry. I didn't thank him. I just squeezed his shoulder and said, "I'm here now." That night, Claire and I walked out to our cars in silence. She turned to me, her face lit by the street lamp glow. "Do you think we're okay?" she asked. "We're getting there," I said. "We're not who we were. That's a start." She smiled, not the old smug grin, but something softer. Funny how everything had to fall apart for us to finally get honest. Sometimes that's the only way anything changes, I said. Things break, so we have to decide what's worth fixing. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about revenge anymore. It never really was. It was about reclaiming something no one could give me: my own voice, my own worth, my own peace. Months passed. Life didn't magically fix itself, but the noise settled. Claire kept her job at the clinic and started taking night classes in public health. She said she didn't want to chase the white coat again. She wanted to rebuild from the ground up differently this time. I believed her, not just because of her words, but because of how she showed up. Steady, present. Not perfect, but finally real. Our parents sold the house, downsized to a modest place closer to Claire's apartment. It was strange helping them pack. Every box felt like a piece of the performance peeling away. The photos, the polished trophies, the expensive but meaningless furniture, all symbols of the life they tried to project. When we were taping the last boxes shut, Dad looked at me and said, "This feels more like starting over than losing." I nodded. Sometimes they're the same thing. His memory slipped more often now. Some days he'd call me by my childhood nickname or ask about old neighbors who'd moved years ago. But on his good days, we talked. About fire stations, old cars, even regret. He never apologized outright, not in words. But every time he asked about my work or bragged to a neighbor that his son was a firefighter, it was a kind of quiet atonement. That was enough. Mom mellowed too. The pride that once shaped her conversations turned inward. She started volunteering something she always claimed she didn't have time for. When I asked her why, she said, "I want to feel useful for the right reasons." She never said the wrong ones. She didn't have to. Claire paid me back. Not all at once, but bit by bit. Every check came with a note. Not just thanks, but reflections. "This job is hard," one read. Not because of the tasks, but because I'm learning how to be enough without status. Another said, "It's strange, I used to think you had nothing. But you had peace." I never understood what that was worth. I kept every note. Not because I needed the praise, but because it reminded me how far we'd come. And I had changed too. The old version of me used to wait for approval like it was oxygen. Now I measured my worth by the life I'd built on my own terms. I bought a house that spring. Small, nothing flashy, but it had a backyard and enough room to host dinners. The first meal I cooked there, I invited Claire, Mom, and Dad. We sat around a table I had picked out myself in a home no one else had paid for eating food I made. There was no talk of careers, no comparisons, just stories, laughter, a little wine. Claire brought a pie. It was terrible, but no one said anything. That night, as they were leaving, Mom hugged me and whispered, You turned out better than we deserved." After they left, I stood in the doorway for a long time. The house was quiet, full of the kind of silence that doesn't echo, just rests easy. And I realized that revenge had never been the point. Not really. Revenge is loud, messy, filled with fire. What I'd found was something quieter, stronger. Not revenge redemption, not theirs. They had to see who I was when they couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't force them. I didn't demand respect. I lived my life in a way that made it impossible not to see. That was the win. That was the justice. Sometimes people don't learn until everything breaks. And sometimes they don't say they're sorry in words, but they show you. With effort, with change. And sometimes that's enough. It has to be. Because holding on to bitterness doesn't keep you warm. But building your own fire, that does. Now, when people ask about my family, I tell them the truth. It's complicated, but better than it was. And when they ask what changed, I say I stopped waiting for them to understand me and started living like I didn't need them to. That's when they came around. Funny how that works. The version of me that they used to ignore, that version was always enough. It just took time for them to see it. But me, I stopped waiting a long time ago, and I've never felt lighter. Story 2, keep your hands off the food, you're not related. While I was paying for the $8,000 supper, my parents screamed at my fiancée. Then without my money, enjoy your retirement. I lost my temper when cutting them off permanently and canceled the $38,000 cruise I had given her. She appeared yelling on my porch a few days later. Hello everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe. Since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity, it's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. The video subreddit will now begin. I discovered 8 months ago that family is not based on blood. A retirement meal descended into a complete catastrophe. They treated me rudely and believed that I would still be responsible for everything. They were mistaken. This is what transpired. Since I was 16, I, a 29-year-old man, have been grinding. I began performing simple plumbing work for my neighbor who ran a small contracting firm during the summers. Learned everything in 4 years. Home-based, commercial, 3 a.m. emergency calls. When there was flooding in someone's cellar, living in a studio apartment that could hardly accommodate my bed and a small refrigerator, I tried to save as much money as I could. I learned the importance of every dime throughout those formative years. My buddies from high school were spending a lot of money on parties and concerts. I spent weekends at supply stores studying how to install pipes and clean drains, committed part numbers to memory, and developed connections with wholesalers. I launched my plumbing firm 5 years ago with a $45,000 business loan. The first year was tough, saving gas money by sleeping in my vehicle between jobs and subsisting on peanut butter sandwiches and ramen. The amount in my checking account was precisely $300. My first significant commercial contract was with a chain of restaurants that required all of their locations to be maintained. Everything changed with that deal. Consistent $85 per month for upkeep and emergency calls at 12 sites provided me with the funds to purchase better equipment and recruit my first employee. The restaurant business heard about it. I became the go-to person for commercial kitchen plumbing emergencies all of a sudden. I now have a shop that is in 500 square feet, 3 vehicles, and I make around $180,000 a year. I concentrate on residential and emergency calls while Sam, my business partner, manages the commercial side. Next year, I plan to purchase the facility we rent, and we have 2 apprentices studying the profession. We construct bespoke fittings in the shop's fully equipped machine room, and I recently spent $15,000 on a new pipe threading machine that reduces production time by half. With all the contractor kits, toolboxes, ladder racks, and auxiliary lighting, my own vehicle is a fully equipped F-250 Super Duty. I write it off even though it cost me $65,000 since it's a mobile office. Allison, my 26-year-old fiancée, is a second-grade teacher who genuinely cares about her students. She manages to make learning enjoyable for a group of 7-year-olds while spending her own money on classroom materials and staying late for parent conferences. She embodies all that my family does not. Kind and patient. Never behaves as though the world is in debt or anything. We have been living together for 8 months in a good 2-bedroom house I purchased in a neighborhood. And we have been together for 3 years. It's not humiliating. It was a foreclosed home. I purchased it for $185,000, spent an additional $40,000 refurbishing it, and built a walk-in shower with body jets and rain heads in the master bathroom. I reasoned that my bathroom had to be stunning since I work in plumbing. To be honest, Allison has better taste than I do, and she chose every finish. Even though the kitchen makeover was more expensive than my first work vehicle, it was well worth the money to watch her smile when we were done. The problem with success is this. Family members start showing a keen interest in your financial status as soon as you start earning real money. My parents' other expenditures were barely covered by their government salaries and Dad's pension, so that I've been paying their $400 rent each month for the past 2 years. Although they never asked outright, there were usually clues about their financial difficulties and their concerns about paying their rent. In order to assist them, I set up an automated transfer as the obedient son. The manipulation should have been obvious to me. Every month around the 25th, Mom would phone and tell me about unforeseen costs, auto repairs, medical bills, and housekeeping, always just enough to make me feel bad about having money while they were struggling. Dad would call and tell me how proud he was of my accomplishments and how he knew I would look after the family. A classic praise-wrapped guilt trip. Mom. Carol worked in the motor vehicle department for 37 years, and I can assure you that she took pleasure in making people unhappy. She has ideas about everything from how I run my business to why Allison isn't good enough for me, acting as though her decades of government work make her some sort of public service hero. David has been retired from his post office work for 4 years, Dad. He spends his days griping about everything from the weather to gas costs while watching television news. He's not a horrible man. He's simply been totally subjugated by his mother for the whole of their 32-year marriage. His mother's spending habits quickly deplete his pension, which is a respectable $3,200 a month. Britney, my sister, works for a healthcare organization in corporate marketing, using catchphrases like optimizing client engagement and synergy-sizing solutions all the time. She is married to a man named Brian who works there and is genuinely quite intelligent. Britney pretends to be better since she has a college degree and wears professional clothes, but she actually lives paycheck to paycheck in an apartment that costs her $200 a month and $2,000. Since I began earning more money than she did without student loan debt, she has been envious of my success. She asks her father for gas money, and when she misses one payment, she behaves like she's on the Forbes Council. She'll say things like how some individuals are lucky in business or how blue-collar jobs aren't long-term viable. She has college loans totaling $75,000 for a marketing degree that hardly earns more than my trainees do. Brian has always been understanding of me. He earns a respectable salary as a network administrator for a mid-sized business and doesn't put on a false front. He is one of the only family members who, rather than making disparaging remarks about my good fortune, congratulated me when my business took off. Diego, my cousin, has always been the most typical member of our family and works in construction. He exposes people's hypocrisy and doesn't act as though nothing is wrong. Brandon, his older brother, is a mechanic who attends family gatherings but keeps to himself most of the time. Diego manages a team for a commercial contractor of moderate size. He's wise enough to save for the quiet seasons, yet he makes good money while they're busy. Last summer, I took Allison to a family cookout, which is when the issue began. Allison's casual sundress instantly made Mom appear like the snooty government worker she saves for those she views as inferior. Allison attempted to strike up a discussion about her mother's garden and offered to assist with the dishes. Throughout the afternoon, Mom treated her like Allison was trying to go ahead of her in line at the car dealership. When Allison revealed that she was considering pursuing a master's degree, Mom said very little. According to Mom, educators should concentrate on teaching rather than earning unnecessary degrees. Mom retorted that the family had its customs and didn't require outside help when Allison volunteered to bring dessert to the next get-together. Traditional passive-aggressive tactics intended to make Allison feel uncomfortable without coming off as overtly nasty. The only one who appeared to notice Mom's actions was Brian. He made it a point to involve Allison in discussions, including asking her thoughts on certain educational software his business was thinking about using for staff training. Britney hardly recognized the existence of Allison, too preoccupied to stop looking through her phone and whining about the turmoil at work. I wanted to do something special for Mom when she revealed that she was finally retiring after 7 years of devoted public service. She was my mother, regardless of how she treated Allison, and the motor vehicle department's 37 years of handling irate customers were worthy of praise. Allison and I organized a week-long Caribbean trip after a surprise retirement dinner at a fancy waterfront restaurant. Their private dining room with views of the waterfront cost $8,200 for the evening reservation. The entire package, which includes a 5-course meal and a fine wine selection, premium balcony cabins on a luxury cruise ship, Specialty meal packages, spa credits, shore excursions, and 4 ports were all included in the additional $38,000. Cost of the voyage? In addition, there is travel insurance, since I'm not a moron. I researched the ship's layout, compared cabin positions, read reviews on all cruise forums, and spent hours investigating that vacation. Wanted to ensure that Mom had the ideal retirement party. On the evening of the meal, Allison had remained after school to assist a kid whose parents were going through a difficult divorce, so we were approximately 15 minutes late. Allison was being Allison, and the child was misbehaving in class. She had to make sure he was all right before she left. She purchased this navy blue dress especially for the event, and it made her seem stunning. I got what I paid for and more in the restaurant's private dining room. You could see million-dollar boats anchored offshore from the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the marina. Soft jazz music was coming from speakers as the sunset painted the ocean in shades of orange and gold. Real linen tablecloths, cutlery, and cloth napkins were not seen. This is the type of establishment where a dinner for 2 often costs $200 before drinks. The executive chef had prepared a special meal using foods that were found locally, and the restaurant's sommelier had specially chosen the wine pairings for each dish. This was no franchise eatery. They had a waiting list for regular reservations and a chef nominated for a top culinary award. When we entered, there were already 14 people sat around the enormous mahogany table. As if someone had pressed a mute button, the discussion abruptly ended. In addition to my mom, dad, Britney, Diego, and Brandon, there were my cousins Rachel and Kevin, Uncle Pete and Aunt Linda, and a few more family members I only ever see at funerals and weddings. When we entered, Brian got up and shook my hand. "This site is amazing, Paul. I appreciate you organizing this for Carol's retirement." Allison quickly thanked her mother for letting her participate in such a great gathering, apologized for being late, and explained the student situation. Mom hardly gave her a look instead, looking at the wine list through her reading glasses as if she were interpreting ancient hieroglyphics. Based on the amber ring on the white tablecloth, Dad was already working on what seemed to be his second Manhattan. Brittany's finely manicured nails clicked on the screen of her iPhone as she quickly typed answers to some business emergency. Brian tried to catch her attention to properly greet us, but she hardly looked up as we sat down. The family was already starting to eat when the waitress brought out the first meal, expressing gratitude for the quality of the food. Brandon was describing why certain automobile engines are superior than others, and Diego was telling Uncle Pete about a job site where they had discovered a time capsule from the 1960s. Brian was genuinely listening and interacting with Dad like a regular person when he asked him about his experiences at the post office. Since the mushroom was the nearest appetizer to her seat, Allison reached for it. At that point, Mom made the decision to show off just how conceited and cruel she could be. "Keep those away from you. Those are solely for family." Like a chainsaw cutting through plywood, that the remarks sliced through the dinner discussion. Immediately, everyone at that table ceased speaking. Even the waiter at the far end of the table, who was replenishing water glasses, paused and gazed. Allison's face was flaming bright red, not furious red, but the deep, humiliating red of someone who has just been publicly humiliated in front of 14 people, and her hand halted inches from the plate. Brian had a terrified expression. "What are you talking about? Aunt Carol Allison is already essentially family." Mom purposefully reached across the table to get the same mushroom Allison had been after, while glaring at Allison with utter disdain. She kept her eyes on it and bit into it. She chewed precisely and slowly as if she were demarcating her domain. A fiancé is not a wife. Blood is not what a wife is. This family has always had a hierarchy, and certain members need to understand their role. Diego, who had been sipping a beer in silence while seeing this, picked up 3 mushrooms and slammed them onto Allison's plate with enough force to rattle the cutlery. "Jess, there you have it." The family privilege was formally activated. When Brittany eventually looked up from her phone and realized what was going on, she smirked, really smirked, instead of standing up for Allison, as if it was amusing to watch someone be humiliated. The woman had just laughed when she saw her aunt publicly disparage another human being. I glanced around the table, hoping that someone would point out Mom's actions. Dad's Caesar salad immediately captivated him. Uncle Pete was reading the wine list as if it were a secret from the government. Something inside of me exploded when Allison whispered that she wasn't really hungry anymore. I got up so quickly that my chair brushed the wooden floor. "We're heading out now, Allison." With surgical precision, Mom cut into the free bread without even looking up from her plate. "Take a seat." "Paul, don't make a big deal out of something so unimportant." "I look foolish. I'm paying $200 for a dinner, and you just made my fiancé look foolish. and you fear that I will embarrass myself. She took notice of that. She looked up as if I had just said something in a foreign tongue. You asked us to join you in celebrating my retirement. I'm having this dinner to celebrate. This was the dinner you had for your celebration. The past tense. Have fun making the payment. Diego dropped his napkin on his plate and got up. What do you know, I've finished as well. Even for this family, this behavior is extremely problematic. Brian took Britney's arm and pushed away from the table. We're also going. This is totally out of place. Britney's arm jerked away. Brian, take a seat. Paul is exaggerating. Britney Noma Allison was humiliated without cause by your aunt. I'm not going to stay for this. I heard Britney yelling at Brian to get back in his chair and stop causing a scene as we made our way to the exit. After destroying a family relationship in front of 14 witnesses, the woman who reared me was going to eat her 5 courses as if it were any other Tuesday night. We were standing in the parking lot of the restaurant. Brian, Allison, Diego, and I were the 4 of us. Britney had remained indoors, presumably to make amends and savor her pricey dinner. Brian appeared mortified by the entire incident. I sincerely apologize for what transpired in there, Paul. That was totally inappropriate. Diego was shaking his head and smoking a chain. Your mother has gone completely insane. That was extremely cruel, even though I've witnessed small-scale family drama before. Allison was just humiliated by her at a dinner. You're spending a lot of money. Brian took his phone out. I'm making a ride-sharing call. If Britney wants to stay and finish dinner with people who believe that treating others like trash is okay, she can find her own way home. I recalled the cruise at that point. The $38,000 surprise was in my email inbox for 7 days while I was on a lavish cruise. Spa credits, shore excursions, cause a meal, unlimited speciality, dining packages, and premium balcony suites with private verandas. Costa Maya Grand Cayman and Jamaica. First, I took out my phone and dialed the restaurant. When I explained that I had to leave due to a family emergency, the manager was surprisingly understanding. Respected sir, has anyone in your group eaten or drunk anything tonight? I'm confident they'll finish the entire meal and they're probably still working on the appetizer course. If so, we can arrange a partial refund for the portions that were not used, but the room reservation fee and the amount that was consumed will still be charged. All right, just make sure I don't have to pay for the entire evening when after 20 minutes, half of the party left. The wait time for the cruise cancellation was 31 minutes. When I arrived at the cruise line at last, I was given an explanation of their cancellation policy by the representative. Because I was canceling over 45 days before my trip, the total cost was $600. Within 10 to 14 business days, the remaining $37,400 would be reimbursed. Stop everything. The entire reservation. Allison's eyes were wide as she gazed at me. What are you doing, Paul, regaining control? They want to pretend that you are not related to them. All right, officially family gatherings are canceled. Brian shook my hand and got into his rideshare when it arrived. You made the right decision, Paul. Such treatment should not be tolerated by anyone. Allison went to take a shower and relax, and Diego and I followed her back to my house. In my living room, Diego and I ordered food while talking about what had just transpired. It was a 38 grand cruise. Diego whistled low, I told him. For just 2 hours, Carol's entitled attitude got the better of her, costing her the trip of a lifetime. But the financial repercussions didn't stop there. I took action the following morning that I ought to have taken months earlier. Without even asking my parents if they wanted to treat Allison like trash, I stopped the $400 monthly rent payment that I had been making to them for the past 2 years. Their financial issues could be resolved on their own. Within hours, my phone began to buzz. A perfect storm of financial panic had been sparked by the restaurant bill, the canceled cruise, and now the unpaid rent. I had 203 text messages and 89 missed calls by the time I switched my phone back on the following morning. The number of notifications resembled a scene from a disaster film. When they discovered that I had canceled their rent payment, the messages swiftly became more heated. They had begun by being perplexed and anxious about the restaurant bill. Paul, this month's rent payment did not go through. Does your bank have a problem? Then the frantic begging began. We will be assessed late fees if the rent is not paid by the 5th. Is it possible to send it by hand? Then the panic over money really started. The eatery is requesting $7,400. We also have no rent money right now. It's a catastrophe. Our apartment is going to be taken away. However, the tone changed to one of blatant entitlement once they learned about the cruise. Was my cruise really canceled? My retirement gift was that. You can't simply back out of your commitment. Britney's messages were the most telling. You're acting rudely. You're punishing the entire family for one comment made by mom. Because of your outburst, they are now unable to pay the rent. At about noon, I gave Britney a call. Paul, I'm grateful. You have to send the rent money to your parents today. Concerning their payment, they are in a panic. How about sending it? While the $400 a month is beyond my means, I have bills of my own, you know. They'll then have to solve it on their own, I suppose. You're being completely heartless. They raised you, supported you, and this is how you repay them, by cutting them off financially over some stupid dinner drama. Britney. Mom publicly humiliated Allison in front of the entire family. If you think that's acceptable behavior, you can cover their expenses yourself. I told you I can't afford it. You make more money than anyone in the family. It's your responsibility. It's not my responsibility. I'm not their father or their employer. I was helping out of kindness, and they showed they don't deserve that kindness. Britney was quiet for a moment, then came back with pure venom. You're an ungrateful little shit. After everything they've done for you, and you abandoned them over your precious girlfriend's hurt feelings. She's my fiancé, and I'm done with this conversation. I hung up and blocked her. Number 2. That afternoon, my phone rang from Brian's number. Paul, it's Brian. Look, I wanted to apologize for Britney's behavior last night, and this morning. She's been going crazy trying to figure out how to help your parents with rent. She's been pressuring me all morning to cover their upon $400 rent payment. She says it's a family emergency and we need to step up since you're being unreasonable. And what did you tell her? I told her it's not my responsibility to pay rent for her parents. I never agreed to financially support her extended family, and I'm not starting now. Good for you, Brian. That takes guts. She's been screaming at me for 2 hours about family loyalty and stepping up when people need help. But Paul, I work hard for my money, and I'm not paying rent for people who can work and support themselves over the next few days. The family pressure campaign intensified. Uncle Pete called to lecture me about family obligations. Aunt Linda tried the guilt trip approach about mom's years of service. Even some cousins I barely talked to were weighing in about my heartless behavior. But the most satisfying part was watching Britney's marriage start to crack under the pressure. Brian told me later that she'd been having screaming matches with him every night about the rent money, calling him selfish and unsupportive. She couldn't understand why her husband wouldn't just write a check to solve the family crisis. For 3 weeks, things were relatively quiet on the family front. Mom and Dad had apparently figured out their rent situation, probably by downsizing or finding cheaper housing. Britney had stopped calling, and I thought maybe they were finally getting the message. Allison and I decided to plan our own vacation with some of the money I'd gotten back from the cruise cancellation. Nothing as elaborate as the original cruise, but a nice week in the Florida Keys that we could actually afford. We deserved some time away after all the family drama. The morning we left for the airport, I took a selfie of us at the gate with our boarding passes. Both of us were grinning, excited for our first real vacation together. I posted it to social media with the caption, "Off to paradise with my favorite person." Sometimes the best trips are the ones you play on yourself. We boarded our flight, turned off our phones, and didn't think about my family for the entire week. When we landed back home and I turned my phone on, I had 147 notifications. The family nuclear war had exploded across social media while we were gone. Mom had somehow gotten access to my social media post and shared it in some family group chat, spinning a completely false narrative. She was telling everyone I'd literally stolen her retirement cruise and was now flaunting it on social media. Half the family thought I'd actually taken her vacation and was rubbing it in her face. They were accusing us of being cruel, ungrateful, and self-centered. Allison's photo-sharing account had been discovered, and someone was posting offensive remarks, labeling her a home wrecker and more. Fake accounts were sending hate mail to her school email. Without mentioning that I had paid for everything, Mom was telling everyone that I had stolen her retirement cruise and financially abandoned my parents. Canceled it because she treated Allison disrespectfully or because we had paid for this trip ourselves. I was scrolling through the chaos when Diego called. "The family is going completely crazy." Carol wrote that in an attempt to be spiteful, you cut off your parents' finances and stole her retirement cruise. You are now viewed as a monster by half of the family. Do I have to post the truth? I did it already. Shared screen grabs of the restaurant receipts that bore your name. Explained to everyone what transpired during dinner and the reason for the cancellation. Now that they know the truth, about half of the family is pulling away. The other half continues to support Carol. They believe Allison to be a home wrecker, and you're totally messed up. Allison and I had loved our time in the Keys, amazing beaches, delicious seafood, and being away from people who believe financial manipulation is acceptable despite the social media war. What we needed was family behavior. We were both worn out from the journey and the continuous family social media feud when we returned from the Keys on Sunday afternoon. While I went to my first job of the week on Monday, Allison chose to stay home due to a stress headache. There was a serious emergency call because someone's finished recreation room was flooded due to a burst pipe in their basement. A well-paying job that leaves you covered in pipe muck. I had to install a new water heater and replace roughly 20 feet of copper piping. My phone rang at 2:30 p.m. while I was shoulder-deep in pipes. Allison's contact photo and name are displayed on the screen. "Hello, sweetie. Where is Paul?" She was trembling, her voice barely audible above a whisper of sheer fear. "Please, you have to get home now." My blood ran cold at the tone. She was frightened to her core. "What's the matter? What took place?" "Your mother." She approached. "Paul, just go home, please." The line died. I left the homeowner's basement partially flooded with equipment strewn everywhere after dropping my tools and running to my truck. Allison was in the kitchen, pressing frozen corn to her left arm when I found her. Her hair had been pulled out of its ponytail, leaving it disheveled. She had dark red fingerprints on her neck, and her favorite blue t-shirt was ripped at the shoulder seam. What happened, Jesus Christ? Her wrist to elbow was bruised in a dark purple color, the kind that results from someone grabbing and twisting so forcefully that tissue is damaged. Allison made an effort to remain composed. "About an hour and a half ago, your mother arrived banging on the door and yelling about the money and vacation. She flipped out when I opened it, began yelling that I had stolen her retirement and destroyed her life. Made you hostile to your family. You were touched by her. She called me a manipulative bitch who didn't deserve you as she shoved her way in and grabbed my arm, shaking me. She refused to leave when I told her to. I dodged her attempt to punch me in the face and she struck the doorframe instead. She grabbed me by the throat at that point and threatened to teach me what happens to women who disband families. How did you convince her to go when she heard the yelling Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door, threatened to call the police? She only let go and stormed out for that reason. I made a 911 call right away. It took 15 minutes for 2 patrol cars to arrive. Officers Thompson and Rodriguez took more than an hour to record everything. Pictures of Allison's wounds, Mrs. Patterson's witness statements, physical evidence, and witness accounts provide proof of the assault. The strangulation gives us good reason to charge someone with felony assault. Another option is to request a restraining order. I desire both. I want her taken into custody. I also want her to leave for good. I called my mother after the police had left. She responded right away. "Paul, I'm grateful. Allison was touched by you. You physically attacked my fiancée when you came to my house. She's telling lies. She was never touched by me. The bruises were visible to me. The police have pictures. Mother, you made the police call on your own. You are no longer my mother. Mothers don't harm innocent people in any way." I blocked her number after hanging up. After half an hour, Diego showed up with wine and takeout. His face darkened as soon as he saw Allison's bruises. "Carol has gone completely insane. This is blatantly illegal behavior. She will most likely be arrested tomorrow according to the police." "Excellent. Her actions are completely unacceptable. Mom was charged with felony assault after being taken into custody on Tuesday morning. On Wednesday, the restraining order was granted. By Thursday, the whole extended family was fully aware of what had transpired. While Diego shared pictures of Allison's bruises in the family group chat, Britney attempted to rally support for Mom. Family businesses should remain private, according to Uncle Pete. Diego then inquired as to whether he would experience the same emotions if his daughter were abused. Dad's arrival at my house on Friday night was the biggest surprise. He appeared to have aged 15 years in a single week. Wrinkled clothing, untidy hair, and bloodshot eyes. "I'm so sorry, Paul. Pay attention." Then he revealed the secret. "Your mom. She went too far. Yesterday I filed for divorce." That was not what Allison or I had anticipated when I was informed of her actions by the police over the phone. Never in my 32 years of marriage to that woman have I felt such shame. Tears filled his eyes as he gazed at Allison. "I let you two down. Years ago I should have confronted her. Why didn't you?" Allison inquired. "Because it was simpler to remain silent than to put up with her outbursts. I became aware that I had been married to an abuser after seeing those police pictures. The true satisfaction, however, came from seeing Mom and Britney's lives destroyed by the resulting social and financial repercussions. The local newspaper prominently featured Mom's mugshot after her arrest. A former employee of the motor vehicle department was charged with felony assault according to the headline, and it was witnessed by everyone she had collaborated with for 7 years. She lost both her pension and health insurance coverage when the state pension board canceled her retirement benefits after conducting an investigation. A $5,000 fine was imposed as a result of the criminal conviction. Anger management classes must be taken twice a week for 6 months, and 200 hours of community service cleaning parks and highways are required. But I really got my retribution in the civil lawsuit. I engaged a personal injury lawyer who took our case on a contingency fee basis. Assault battery, purposeful emotional distress, medical costs, and Allison's lost wages were all included in the civil lawsuit. Missing work. Just to defend herself, Mom had to pay $400 an hour to her own lawyer. The civil trial was cruel. We had police reports, witness statements, photos, and medical records attesting to Allison's injuries. Mom's lawyer attempted to argue. It was merely a family argument gone awry. However, the evidence was overwhelming. In addition to $18,000 in legal fees, the jury awarded us $47,000 in damages. To cover a portion of the judgment, Mom had to sell her cherished luxury SUV. She took the early withdrawal penalties and liquidated her 401k. When it came to the property settlement, Dad's divorce lawyer persisted. He kept his own retirement accounts, received half the pension, half the house equity, and received alimony. Mom's finances were in ruins after the divorce. Mom was living in a rundown one-bedroom apartment in a bad area of town 6 months later. Because no government agency would hire her with a felony assault conviction, she was working part-time at a big box store stocking shelves. After seeing the mugshot, she lost all of her friends in the motor vehicle department. Britney was her lone ally after the majority of the extended family took sides with Dad and me. It took longer to develop, but Britney's fall was even more satisfying. For months, their marriage had been steadily failing due to their frequent arguments with Brian about money and loyalty to the family. She called him unsupportive and selfish and persisted in pressuring him to contribute to our parents' financial needs, when he declined. Later, Brian informed me that Britney would constantly complain about the family situation when she got home from work and insist that he write checks to fix issues that weren't his to handle. She would yell at him for his lack of compassion, compare him negatively to other husbands who stood up for their families, and threaten to leave if he didn't begin to help her parents out financially. Britney's habit of working late and repeatedly claiming to have important projects that required overtime was the tipping point. When her stories didn't add up, Brian became suspicious. 8 months after the restaurant incident, he called me with unexpected news. "I wanted to share this with you first, Paul. Britney and I are divorcing. What took place?" She was caught cheating. For the past 4 months, she has been having an affair with a man from her marketing department. She blamed me for not being more supportive during her family crisis when I presented her with the evidence. I was informed by Brian that he filed for divorce. The finest aspect, their prenuptial agreement was unbreakable. Prior to marriage, Brian had demanded it. Although Britney had signed it with the belief that she would never have to worry about it, it now meant that she would leave the marriage with nothing more than her credit card debt and personal belongings. Britney made a valiant effort to keep her marriage intact by pledging to stop the affair and attend therapy, but Brian was done. While she was cheating on him, he had been accused of being unsupportive and selfish for months. She had no money for a place of her own and nowhere else to go. In the end, Britney moved in with Mom and Aunt Patricia, Mom's younger sister. Patricia's tiny 2-bedroom apartment was crowded with 2 resentful women. They were both broke and placing the blame for their issues on other people. My life continued to improve in the interim. I got married to Allison. At our wedding, Dad escorted her down the aisle. The wedding fulfilled all of our desires: a small ceremony at an out-of-town vineyard, reception for our family members and close friends who truly helped us. My best man Diego moved everyone to tears with his speech. It was simultaneously heartwarming and humorous. Dad is thrilled to become a grandfather, and Allison is currently expecting a child. He has been working through decades of supporting his mother's abusive behavior and counseling for more than a year. In fact, he's happier than I've seen him in a long time. My company is doing very well. In addition to hiring 3 more staff members, we purchased the building last year. Sam is managing the majority of the day-to-day operations so that I can concentrate on expanding the business, and I'm thinking of opening a second location across town. Mom is unable to attend any family gatherings due to the restraining order. She was unable to attend our wedding, won't be accepted at holiday get-togethers, and won't be able to visit when her grandchild is born. Her inability to treat Allison with basic human decency caused her to become a stranger to her own family. Britney lost her husband, her house, her comfortable lifestyle, and her dignity for 2 hours at a dinner I paid for because she believed she could influence and coerce others into supporting her parents' inappropriate behavior. Sometimes letting toxic people ruin themselves is the best form of retaliation.